Welcome to the Veteran Cancer Talk by the Veteran Cancer Network. I'm your host, Ashton, and today I'm joined by Kevin Sloan, a Marine Corps veteran and two times testicular cancer survivor. Welcome, Kevin.
Hi, Ashton, and welcome, and happy Sunday to you as well.
So, Kevin, let's just go ahead and get it out. So, April is Testicular Cancer Awareness. First of all, thank you for taking the time to be able to speak with us. But we wanted to get your story and kind of hear a little bit about you. So, first off, um, you know, Marine Corps you joined in what year?
2001.
2001. So, was this before or after 9/11?
It was before 9/11. I graduated high school in May, then I ended up going into boot camp in June 2001, and then I was home on my 2-week break before I went to MCT training when 9/11 happened. So I was actually home at my grandparents' house when I saw 9/11 happen, and like I said, at the back of my mind is like, oh man, this is something really, really serious going down. You know.
Mm. Now, when you went back to, like, MCT and then you were going on to your comm school and everything, did you already know that you were gonna be deploying? Were they, letting everybody know, like, "Hey, this is what you signed up for?"
No, not at the moment. It's kind of just like situational awareness, like something we were kind of like, okay, let's monitor what's going to happen. And then once I finished school and got assigned to my unit, which was Second Battalion, First Marines, First Marine Division, out in Camp Pendleton, California, we went out there, met with my higher ups, and started doing my job. But then we had our commanding officer saying, hey, there were some attacks, and then we might need to start looking to possibly prepping and going out to different areas of the Middle East. So that was something that we were looking ahead and kind of get prepped and prepared for.
Mm. Now, what was your MOS or your job?
I was an 0612 field wireman.
Oh, wire dogs. I
Yeah,
spent some
wire
time digging
dogs.
holes with you guys.
Hmm.
Now, where did you deploy to, and when did you deploy?
Okay. My first deployment, I deployed back in 2003. I went to Kuwait first in Camp Wolverine, and then we drove from Kuwait into Iraq. And then it was around, I think, March the 17th of 2003. And that's when we crossed the line and we initially got into attack fire. We went in, drove in, our unit prepared, and we got into heavy combat mission while we're out there in Iraq. So I went through Nasiriyah, Ajubayr, um, the Euphrates River. So we were all over there in those provinces.
Goodness.
Yeah.
Now what I mean, I know when I joined and left, obviously, it was a little bit later when I was in Iraq and Afghanistan, we had the nice cans that we were living in, the chow halls, obviously a little different for
Mhm.
you, but what was that like? What kind of exposures, were you around? Were you eating MREs, hot meals? What was the water?
Yeah, it was a big, kind of like shell shock moment for me. We had MREs. We did get some hot shell in certain spots. When we got to Al Nazariyah, we actually took over one of the little buildings that's not far from one of the little cities in that province. And we, stayed there. We made all the living quarters, and that's where we stayed for our time. And that was roughly a 6-month deployment. And I saw a lot, saw a lot of different countries, while in between going to combat, getting my share of what was going on, trying to learn my environment. But it was very life changing, life interaction, something that I cannot forget. I won't forget, and something I'm going to always cherish because it was just something that was very inspiring and, something that I'm proud that I served my country for.
That's wonderful. I know I felt the same way whenever I was at when I was out there. I felt that, it was very humbling, first of all, to realize that, how wonderful and great we have it as Americans after being in a third world country. And looking back now, do you think that your testicular cancer that you ended up getting, was that, I mean, in your opinion, a cause of, from your time on deployment?
Honestly, I honestly wouldn't know because, like you said, with the way genetics are and the way your genes and how, cancers are aware to your what chromosome, and it's kind of just an unknown. And I know I was exposed to burn pits. I did my two deployments, and it's kind of like it waited down the line. So when I got my first diagnosis back in 2016, I was just like, wow, this is scary and kind of like unknown and just, what was going on with the situation. But I had a very good support staff to be behind me to kind of encourage me. They said, let's attack it head on and let's, persevere. And, you know, what medicine is and how, the doctors are, they're like, let's take an aggressive approach to it and, let's attack it.
Now, what brought you back to, talking about 2016, getting that diagnosis? What prompted you to go, seek medical care?
Okay. I was actually in interaction with my wife at the time. We were actually going out, and I felt that I had something heavy on my testicle, and I felt like and I showed it to her, and it looked like it was the size of a golf ball. And she's like, "Yeah, you should get that kind of checked out." And the first thing we did was I went to a local emergency clinic or urgent care clinic, had the doctors do a testing examination. We did an ultrasound, and they kind of said, "Hey, we think you might have testicular cancer," but it wasn't confirmed until I went to a urologist, and then I got assigned to a urologist, and the urologist said, "Yeah, well, let's go ahead and we're going to diagnose you with this." And they didn't know what stage it was at because it was kind of fairly new at the time, and they were looking at it like, "Oh yeah, got a mass growth." And from there, we prepped, we made a game plan. We started with, hey, let's go ahead and do the surgery, get the testicular removed, and then we can do the biopsy and see where it was at, if it was contained, make sure it didn't spread. And that was my first interaction with my first bout of testicular cancer.
Now, did you go through any chemotherapy or anything like that? Or was it, just the orchiotomy and then, surveillance?
It was an orchiotomy and surveillance at the time for my first diagnosis, and kind of like that, like I said, the prick, probe, blood test, blood checks every 6 months, or I think it was every 3 months. We kept doing recurring blood checks to make sure it didn't spread, it didn't hit my lymph nodes, certain areas of the body. So it was definitely, surveillance to a T. Also CT scans, also MRIs. So it was fairly just a lot of surveillance and blood work and pretty much routine checkups.
Now, how long were you under surveillance before you either were in remission or before you got that second diagnosis?
Okay. For surveillance purposes, I think they had me for up to 3 years. And that's what I'm actually doing now after my second bout of testicular cancer. I was doing it for the first 3 years, we did it every 6 months. And then once you hit your 3 year mark, then they'll try to work on pushing it annually if they haven't really checked up and seen any occurrences or anything that looks different from the markers or anything that will kind of throw them off, their monitoring. So that was something that we looked into.
How long between, your initial diagnosis from your, to your second?
It was roughly about from 2016 to 2023, like 8 years, probably. About 7,
Bit of
8
a
years.
That's a bit of a gap. I know, at least for in my husband's case, they think after 5 years you're in, remission.
Mhm.
That usually that's the case. So, you get your you're going back and you're not doing surveillance of that period, correct? I guess what were the symptoms then that made you go back and get looked at again?
It wasn't really no symptoms because, like, with testicular cancer, there's really nothing that is symptom based. It's just that they saw something in my blood work, and they said, "Hey, look, like you got your cancer's probably spread it to the right side, so we need to go ahead and do the tracheotomy." And I was like, in the back of my mind, I was kind of like nervous and hesitant, and I'm like, "Oh, we got to go through this again." And this time the doctor said, "Let's do a different approach with the what we're going to attack this with. We're doing the oroctomy, surveillance, and let's do some rounds of chemotherapy." And they opted to give me 2 rounds of chemotherapy to say, look, let's go ahead and eradicate it once and for all. So I did my 2 rounds of chemo after my surgery, and now it's kind of just been monitoring blood work, blood marker checks, and that's what's been going on for the last couple years.
Now, I wanna get into the chemotherapy. Now, you mentioned earlier that you had a wonderful support system, and I think that is really key when it comes to going through any type of health diagnosis. Walk me through chemotherapy. What was that like? Was it, 5 days a week? Was it, like, specific rounds where you had maybe 1 day only, or what did that look like?
Okay. It was actually done through the VA in my local VA here in Tampa, Florida, with James Haley VA Hospital, and we did the 1 round, which was 1 day, and I pretty much spent like from I want to say from like 9 a.m. to like 3:30 p.m. doing the whole thing. So they started with the prep, getting my medicines ready, getting the IV drawn and started up, and then getting the infusion of the treatment. And then probably around like 3 o'clock, we were done. And then they kind of said, okay, let's monitor, make sure everything, was good. And they let me go home. And then they said, if you're starting to feel any side effects, which could be somewhat common after chemotherapy, kind of let them know so they can be in the loop and know what's going on. So that's what I did. I did one round in October, and I did the second round, I think, towards the end of October, going into November, and that's how I did my 2 rounds of treatment.
So is it just one session every Monday, or was it, only, like, that one time a month, and then the second time, was your
Yeah,
second
one
time a month?
one time a month. Yeah, it was scheduled for like a Wednesday, I think it was my first one, and then I came in, did my prep, did the treatment, got monitored after that, and then went home. And then for the second treatment, the same kind of process.
Now did you get any residual symptoms from the chemotherapy?
The main thing I got out of it was just fatigue, which is kind of lucky because I know a lot of times with chemotherapy, you can get like maybe hair loss or you start feeling nauseated or ill. And also in the medicine they gave me something for anti-nausea, so I didn't have those symptoms, which was a good thing because I know nauseated is not a fun thing to go through. But that's what I felt with my kind of symptoms. I think I did get a little bit of hair loss, so that's kind of something I deal with, and it's not so bad.
Okay. What was it like with your family? I know that you said earlier when we were talking, you said that you have a wife and, kids. What was that conversation like when you told her the initial time that you had testicular cancer versus the second time, and how did she support you during your entire health episode?
Okay. No, my first time, she actually was there in the urgent care with me when we first got the first diagnosis. So she was kind of there and she kind of dealt with it because her mother dealt with some various form of cancer. So she kind of could understand what we were going through. And it's kind of like, for me, my heart sank and I felt like, it's kind of like one of those shock moments. It's like, wow, like I got cancer. That's something that you don't want to ever hear. But, it's something that's becoming more common now in this day and age. And, with that support that she gave me, I let my mother know, my brother, my dad. So they all were just there saying, look, we're going to, support you, make sure you're good, mentally, physically, we can help do some things, around the house to kind of, take a lot of it off your shoulders so you could just focus on rest, recovery, going through the process of monitoring until the second bout. And the second bout, like I said, that one was a little bit more in depth because of the surgery post-op, and then do the chemotherapy treatments.
Okay. Now, I know this is something that my husband was offered. With this was the what is it? Females can get the breast implants and that kind of stuff. Were
Mhm.
you offered that through the VA as well? Not breast implants, but for.
Oh, oh, yeah, the plastic, with the
Mhm.
saline solution to replace it. I wasn't really offered that, and I was very surprised that I didn't get offered either situation, just full the removal, then the biopsy, and go on your way. Yeah.
I know my husband, because we're training for this bicycle ride and everything. He says that he has more room now to be able to move around. He kind of makes light of it a little bit, but no, that's interesting because that's one of the first things that I guess that a lot of the breast cancer survivors are normally offered at the VA.
Mhm.
So I find it interesting that you weren't even offered.
Yeah.
So go ahead and tell me now. So you are a few years post your latest cancer treatment. Go ahead and tell me, what is life like now for you?
Life for me is kind of just a day by day. I work, go home, do my normal bit routine, and just with now that it's been post, going on 3 years of post treatment, it's just monitoring blood checks. They want to do the checking lymph nodes when they do the cancer markers, and I just got seen by the doctor, I think about a month ago, and they were just telling me that my cancer markers were good. There was nothing that was throwing them off, and they were saying, let's go ahead and push it to more of an annual, checkup now. So next year it'll be just every year they'll do the checkups now and just monitoring surveillance and things of that nature. So
Well,
that's what's next
congratulations.
on
That's
the
such a good
yeah.
feeling.
Thank you. Thank you.
I know it's a conversation in our household is after that 5-year mark, for my husband, he's kinda offered really nothing after that whenever it comes to scans and besides the normal blood work, which we know now that most, standard blood draws don't have the, cancer, indicators in there. I mean, there is that new MCED test that's coming out. I think you and I talked about that multi-cancer early detection blood screening, but Are you being offered longer, basically longer evaluation, longer surveillance since you've had it, come back again? Or is it gonna be that still the same as before after, X amount of years and you're gonna just go back
I
to
think it's gonna be the same before with the just monitoring surveillance, check the lymph nodes, do the, CT scans and the blood work pretty much. Yeah, they haven't offered that testing that you were mentioning, and like I said, it's an interesting testing case that I think, a lot of us as advocates to definitely something that should be pushed along because like I said, cancer is an occurrence. We don't know what type and what's out there. And a lot of ones that we see that are most common are either melanoma or testicular or breast. So, or colon, which is another one for, males in my particular race and genre. It's just that early detection, early surveillance, it's kind of like being proactive.
absolutely. Now does it make I mean, I know for us, I was looking at some of the VA data. Now, I know you've done a lot of, research and advocacy, with this with veterans, but I know it's lung cancer, colon cancer, and the reproductive cancers, I think, are one of the highest ones in the VA. But when you look at, the screenings that are being, asked, I mean, you really have to push. I mean, at least in our sense, we had to push, and a lot of veterans I talk with, they have to really advocate for themselves because of that age. They all, well, when you're 45, when you're 50, that's when you go in for screening.
Hmm.
Are you kinda hearing the same things, or is it different at, the Tampa VA?
With the Tampa VA, we haven't really heard anything yet with like the cancer stuff and screens like that. They're more worried about, personnel changes, with what's going on with the administration, having their way with the VA, our budgets and things of that nature. But now with certain, entities, they're trying to like push different things like, the community care program, the MOVE program, cancer research. They're starting to trying to get that data out there, but a lot of times they work hand in hand with Moffitt Cancer Center, which is one of the biggest cancer facilities in the nation besides the Mayo Clinic that they utilize here in Florida. So that's one of the ones that they use as a backbone to work with those doctors as well to kind of get things prolonged. But like for me in my case, I didn't utilize Moffitt, which is kind of rare. It's like, all right, the VA is going to take the lead of it and go from there. You know.
And how did you enjoy your care? Did you enjoy your team? Did you feel that you were adequately, taken care of? Because I hear it on both ends, and I always look for that
Mhm.
positive, like, "Come on, VAs, let's, help
Yeah,
our veterans."
it was a streamlined experience. The doctors were very, transparent. They gave me a lot of good positives. They, kept me in the loop of things. They said, "Hey, look, we're gonna, monitor everything, attack it head on, and then, with pulse surveillance, they say you follow your reports. If you have any questions, concerns, reach out to the team." And they gave me a little kind of like a trinket basket when I got finished with my second round of chemo, and it had like this little goodie bag, and it had like a candle in it, a butterfly, all different things that kind of represent like what cancer, means for some, and you being a survivor. And I felt that kind of like sense of just like appreciation, like you really thought about my care, and you really gave me that comfort that hey, look, this is something that you're going through, and that it's going to be all right, and you have that support staff to be with you. So it's a
Tampa
very, very
VA, you're
positive
killing it,
experience.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Now, what about, for the mental health side? A lot of people are focusing on the physical side when it comes to a cancer diagnosis, but if anybody that's going through any type of major health, I mean, you usually have those feelings of anxiety and, maybe a little bit of, why me, that depression state. Were you offered any type of behavioral health, counseling
Yes.
or anything like that?
Yes, I was.
That's
And
fantastic.
also, I did some mental health before I got my second diagnosis, and I did have a mental health awareness. And she was prior Navy, and the doctor was very, very, thorough, transparent. She said, if you have anything you want to get off your chest, you have the time allotted to speak, and talk about whatever, and get a game plan, and kind of just things of that nature. And it's very good to have that mental health, support staff, or also your social media, things as well, from, X, Facebook groups, Instagram reels, kind of find out, people that will relate with you and understand what you're going through, and be able to have that kind of safe space to talk about things like cancer and diagnosis, and, the whole process itself. So it was very, enriching, and a lot of good information and support.
Now, does the Tampa VA have support groups for, veterans going through cancer?
Yes, they do. You have to just look them up, or you could just talk with the mental health department, and they can give you those kind of meetings that we have and things of that nature. I, for one, haven't went to a meeting yet personally on my own because I kind of have my own support staff. But you have like the different organizations like the American Cancer Society. You got also the Veteran Cancer Network that you guys work with. You also have testicular cancer groups, organizations. I follow some on X, and I, talk with them, or I may shoot like a message saying, "Hey, this PSA, men get tested because, like I said, it's a rare cancer and it's out there. You got to be proactive and definitely, self checkups is one of the big things to do." So,
Now, when you got testicular cancer, I mean, we did a ton of research, because we wanted to know
hmm
what this was. And one of the things that I noticed is guys don't like talking about this. But when my husband got it, we were having dinner one day and his friend calls him. He's like, I was thinking about you in the shower. And of course, as the wife, I'm like, why are you thinking about my husband in the shower? But he had been going around telling people like, "Hey, go check your balls, make sure that you're, make
hmm
sure that you're good and all that." Because testicular cancer is actually very one, it's a young man's cancer. I say young
hmm
man, children to adults,
yeah,
age 34 is usually anybody over the age of 34, they're actually considered a little on the older side, for it. But
yeah,
it was fascinating to me because I know when I was going through like health ed and when I go see my primary care provider, they always sit there and talk about the breast exams. But my husband was never offered, that on those self checks, and that's the easiest way to be able to check. I don't know if you were offered
hmm
that at all in your life or through your doctors.
No, like I said, for me, I was 33 at the time when I got my first diagnosis. So, like I said, yeah, kind of on the older side, but yeah, they normally when you do your physicals or your self examinations, they want to just to check, just say, hey, if they feel anything, cough, and then kind of send you on your way. But if you feel that something's wrong, that's where you definitely should be like, look, I need to go get seen. I want to make sure everything's good. With the ultrasounds, the scans, blood work, follow up that kind of process. Because, like you said, it's better to be prepared than be not prepared, and it could get any worse.
I mean, you bring up a good point. When it comes to advocating for yourself, and veterans are hard-headed, and we also have that chain of command that we follow through as well. So if somebody in a superior, one of those positions says, "No, you're good," what do you do? I mean, I know my body, but veterans themselves, we were told to, suck it up, you're fine, you don't want to let your, brothers and sisters down. It can be devastating to the body, and so what would you
Mhm.
say, to somebody that's told, "No, you're fine, you don't need to worry about this?"
No, I would tell them to be your advocate for yourself. You know your health is your wealth. That's what it is at the end of the day. And I would tell anybody, if you feel that way, definitely go see a doctor. Go get ask for a second opinion. If you feel, like that they're not, hearing you out, you have your advocates, you have patient advocate, you have different organizations that join and be your support. Be that ear to listen to when if you feel that you need, to be seen and, need to be diagnosed and tested and want to make sure that your body is, in good shape and good form because, like I said, health is wealth at the end of the day. It's paramount for us. It's like we're not a machine. We have to definitely get our tune-ups, checkups, things of that nature. So that's why I definitely advocate and say, look, self-help, self checkups is just do what makes you feel comfortable in your own skin.
Now, I do wanna talk about the VA, just for a few more minutes, but when it comes to, going to your primary healthcare provider and you're trying to advocate and they don't wanna, send out referrals, so then you go to, you ask for I mean, they'll eventually end up doing it, but they might be a little bit of pushback and all that. Are there alternatives where, veterans can go if they only have VA, to rely on? Because it can be hard to get a second opinion, especially
Yeah.
when you're having to, navigate a healthcare system that, is overrun with the amount of veterans versus doctors and nurses and, specialists.
Yeah. With the VA itself, you can actually opt into the veteran community care program if you feel that you're not being, be seen. And I've seen a lot of veterans through radiology or hematology oncology use the community care program as an outlet, be an outside provider that's within their area to get seen, or if they feel that hematology oncology through the VA might not be as abreast, but a lot of times you could talk to a patient advocate, say, look, I don't feel that, if the VA is not giving me what I need, like I said, send me out to community care. And with community care, it is a process. It does take a little bit of time, but they try to be very proactive in getting those things aligned and done and get you out with a doctor so you can get seen. So they do have that option.
Yeah, so at the end of the day, make sure that you're advocating for yourself. Don't
Hmm.
always, I mean, doctors, they went to medical school, but they don't know your body as well as you do.
Exactly. Yeah.
Now, Kevin, you're going back to school, correct? You're looking at
Yes.
you still always self-improving. That's wonderful.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm doing as my side hustle. I'm just going to school, try to study as much as I can. I'm almost done with classes. I hopefully should be done within the next like 2 months or so. So I'm just looking forward to finishing and getting this certification and try to use it toward something else, post forward and post school and see what I can do with this cert. So that's the point game plan for me moving forward. But like I said, I still do my job, which is my daily work, and I try to be the advocate for myself and push to be the best I can be because, like I said, every day is a learning moment, and everything that you do, it just be blessed to be waked up, and you learn different things every day. So, like for me, I take it as you learn something new every day, whether it's small, something big. It's always a teaching moment.
I love that. What is the one thing during your entire process of going through, your entire cancer diagnosis, the treatment and everything that you wish that you had resource-wise, both for yourself and for your family, for your spouse?
I would say the kind of like the whole packet, like they're like a caregiver, program, or because the VA itself, it offers a veterans caregiver program, but it is a whole process you got to go through. You got to sign up for stuff, get trained on it, and then you'll get this, paperwork saying, "Hey, look, now you're certified to be a caregiver." I would say, well, once with cancer diagnosis, definitely kind of get people a phone number or a program they can, link up with and kind of get that, approach of having to see, reaching out, getting information on cancer, because people use Google all day long, and Google's a very good resource outlet to be your search provider. But you kind of want to have extra stuff on the side to have as another, reference point or something that you can utilize on a day-to-day basis. And also, like I said, also follow up with the doctors. Try to have that, be able to have that interaction with them on a constant basis, reaching out to them via phone, email, you know, it's just a way of just keeping that constant communication and keeping those lines open with each other and just being transparent.
Now, do you think that she had a lot of champions in her corner? I know that I definitely had a lot of champions kinda rooting for me and Casey, but it also got a little overwhelming at times too as a caregiver because 'cause you're not the one sitting in the chair having to go through chemotherapy, you're not the one that's
Mhm.
having to go under the knife and get surgery, but you're the one that's having to support that person, and I know at times it can get a little overwhelming. How did she handle it?
She took it as a, approach of, she understood what I was going through, kind of understood what I was going through because her mother dealt with it as well. I gotta just, be there for you, make sure you're good, make sure your mentals are good, and just to kind of be that rock when you need it. And if you need to vent, cry, you just need to talk. She was gonna be there for me, and that's where, I'm humbled and appreciated it. She's been my rock for, going on 17 years, so it's kinda like we just work as a team, and it's not easy. I'll tell you everybody, look, being, married to a person for a long period of time, it's a commitment, and it's just, learn understanding each other and just trying to, have that constant lines of communication. So that's something I'm very humbled with, and, we work our best to try to be the best team out there possible. So, you know.
I think that's huge when it comes to the staying married, first of all, it's hard to stay married to somebody for, more than 10
Mhm,
years, sometimes even more 5 years in today's society, but you
mhm,
put on, the fact that, you're coming from a military family, you also have, a cancer diagnosis, and I have had a hard time. I mean, it's I'm seeing a little bit more couples, making it all the way through, but I mean, it's
mhm.
hard on the relationship, being
It
able to
is,
see that,
yes.
and I am so happy to see that you guys were able, I mean, obviously you guys have a strong foundation and you guys trust each other, and I think that is something that other couples could, benefit from hearing is some advice that you would give to the couple that is currently going through this and, letting those demons kind of get in between their marriage.
Mhm. Best advice I can give is just stay open communication, lean on each other. If you feel that it's not always going to be easy, there's other ways of getting out there, speaking to, you know, therapy, speaking to a professional, getting that information, having your time to speak to them, having their time to speak to them. It's always good to kind of have that support stuff. And also with her, she had like her sisters, like she said, she had therapy if she needed it, and they had those advocates too, also through the DA. They have, counseling support. You can reach out to them and be able to help as well. Because like I said, it's not easy on both sides of the coin, both parties.
So, Kevin, if you can go back in time and give your past self, advice, what would it be?
No, I don't even. That's a good question. I would say do what you did when you were younger by going in the military, getting that life experience. Taught you a lot of different things from, like the three core values of the Marine Corps: honor, courage, commitment. Just, having that self of self pride and working to be the best self of be the better of yourself every day. And when times are tough and things feel like it's all crumbling on you, to kind of have that support staff and link, mentorship, talk to people, find people that's going to be in your corner, that's going to kind of give you the tools to help you, so when you get out, like there's certain things I didn't know that I didn't learn until I got out and got word of mouth, and I said, you know what, pass it along, and or join groups and say, hey, look, there's these different organizations out there to help you get you what you need. There's always different avenues to help, because a lot of this not unknown. Like, we don't talk enough to say, look, there's things out there for us. Go get it. Get the assistance, get the guidance, get the tools, the research, and pass it along, because like I said, everybody don't know everything, and it's good to pass that information along.
Sharing is caring. That's what I always sit there and tell my kids.
Mhm. Mhm.
All right. Anything else, Casey?
Yeah, no, that's it.
All right, Kevin, back to you. So, do you have anything that you would like me to ask or bring up for our listeners?
I'm very humbled for joining the podcast today, and just, I'm appreciative of, the self-awareness, and to tell everybody, cancer is a word that we don't want to hear, but it will come up, and you have to face it head on, and, go through your daily ritual. If you feel that, it's a way of talking with people, getting the information out, getting all of the details, and being that support staff for that person or whoever is in need, whether it's yourself or it's someone that you are supporting, to be there for them. Because, like I said, there's some dark days and days you feel like the world is crumbling on you, and you have to just see the positives out of it at the end of the day and say, look, I'm going to be a survivor. I'm going to get through this. I'm going to get past this. And, it's just something you gotta just encourage and embrace and say, "You know what? I will beat this. I will be a survivor. I will be on ring the bell, that when you're done with treatment, you wanna ring the bell." And that's what I did, and, I have a testament to myself. I have a tattoo that I have of my, cancer ribbon. Let's see if I can get it up on here.
Very
So I have a
nice.
cancer ribbon here, so, yeah, man, it's definitely something I try to, use as my motivation and stuff that I can feel that, I'm close with.
No, that's great, solid advice. It reminds me of, back when I was at boot camp. You know how when you're going on marches and they say
Mhm.
AT&T, or was it AT&T? Reach out and touch
Yep,
somebody? And
reach out
same
to
thing
somebody.
afterwards. So most of us
Yep,
don't do it. We kinda go back. I mean, some people use the resources that are out there, and they are just phenomenal, and they're the ones that really spread the message. And then there's people like me and my husband who are a little knuckleheaded when we got out, and we just used the GI Bill, and that was it. We didn't join the Marine
mhm,
Corps League, didn't do any of that until much later. But I mean, at least for me, I was on the struggle bus. We were trying to figure out life at that point. But no, you bring
mhm,
up some solid advice, and if I can go back, I'd probably take that same advice you just said and apply it to my situation.
yeah. I try to tell my son now, I'm like, "Look, if the military is a just option, I can't say for you not to do it, to do it, but see all your options are available, because, it may be something you might like. You don't know." I just tell people, do your research. Go into it, talk with the recruiter, make sure that they give you the right guidance, because you don't want to go and join a branch that you're not feeling comfortable with, or MOS that you don't feel comfortable in, and sign your, you know, do your research, be prepared, ask all the questions you need, and make decision for you at the end of the day.
All right, Kevin. So, what has been the silver lining throughout all of this? What is the one thing that you can sit there and look back on and be like, it was worth it?
Just, having a support staff, quick actions by the doctors and the game plan and trying to follow it to a T. And, when you don't want to get pricked and probe and get blood work, I definitely say, get it done because, like you said, your health is your health is wealth. Your body is a temple. Utilize it as it can because, like you said, the life is always short, but you want to enjoy it every single day and just be out there and be an advocate for yourself and have that support staff because, when times are tough, you kind of need that person to encourage you, push you forward, say, hey, look, we're going to be there for you. And, day in, day out. And, we got your back. Like I said, we got your six.
Great advice. Well, Kevin, thank you so much for joining us on the Veteran Cancer
You're
Talk.
very,
We
very welcome.
appreciate it. Again, congratulations, two-time testicular cancer survivor. And for any of the men listening or the women that have men or boys in their lives, tell them to go get their balls checked. Thanks again.
Yes, thank you so much and have a great one, Ashton.